Hello and welcome to the Sky Accountants podcast. I'm Ashley Carmichael, and in today's podcast we're providing an update on the announcements made about personal tax rate cuts recently by PM Anthony Albanese. As many people will by now be aware, back in the 2018 federal budget, the then Morrison government embarked on a reasonably significant overhaul of personal taxation in 3 phases. Stages 1 and 2 have long since been implemented, and they focused on providing some tax relief to the low and middle income earners out there. So the stage 3 cuts were then more focused on higher income earners and were a bit more politically controversial, and there was a little bit of wrangling needed at the time to get those through, and so part of that wrangling was a deferred start date of the 1st of July 2024, the date that's now approaching. Now, legislation was passed back then to give effect to those tax cuts, and we've just been waiting. So come the 1st of July, they would have automatically taken effect. But fast forwarding to more recent times, and those stage 3 tax cuts have been in the spotlight. And there was a bit of talk about them through the recent election campaign in which the Albanese Labor government won power. And what's notable about that is that the PM and some of the other ministers, or now ministers, made some promises that they wouldn't be rolling back those tax cuts, that they'd be leaving them alone. But as we now know and have seen, the debate had been brewing for some time, and there was a lot of speculation about whether or not there would be a rollback or some changes, and that sort of reached fever pitch in the lead up to the Labor Party caucus meeting back on the 24th of Jan. In that meeting, the Labor caucus did make a decision to make some changes. There were a few comments made to the press following that meeting, and then the following day, PM Albanese was due to give an address at the press club, which of course he delivered, and in that address he unveiled Labor's plan to make some changes. And look, they're really trying to frame these changes as being necessary to address cost of living pressures, which I think we can all agree are real. We are in a time of fairly prolonged high inflation. And so they're framing it as being necessary to address that. And it's sort of being spruiked as a tax cut for all, and not just those on the higher income brackets. What we've got, though, is a bit of a sort of a complex scenario at the moment with different rates and all that sort of stuff. And so I thought I would just step through what we've got now in the current financial year, the one that ends June 24, what was originally set to start and is legislated, being the original stage 3 cuts, and then what's been announced. So what we're currently dealing with as personal tax rates is from the first $18,200 of income, there's a zero tax rate. From $18,200 to $45,000, we're paying 19%, and then from $45,000 to $120,000, it's 32.5%. From $120 to $180, 37%, and $180 and up, 45%, plus the 2% Medicare levy, of course. What was due to happen with the legislated stage 3 tax cuts was to leave the lower level tax brackets the same, but to then make some changes and eliminate one of the brackets. So what we were looking at, first 18,200, 0%, 18,200 to 45, 19%, identical. But then what we had was a shift, so instead of 45 to 120, it was going to be 45,000 to 200 at a flat 30% rate. And then we would have the top rate of 45% for 200 and above. And that delivered some pretty significant tax savings for people earning in that tax bracket. And back at the time when it was announced, it was framed as being necessary to bring Australia into line with what a lot of jurisdictions around the world are doing, and to make Australia a competitive place, and to help us attract talent, etc., etc. In terms of the new rates that have been announced, so we're still dealing with 18,200 tax-free, but they want to make a little change in the 18,000 to 45,000 range, so they'll drop that from 19% to 16%. We'll then have a bracket from 45,000 to 135 at 30%, then 135,000 to 190 at 37%, and then 190 and above 45%. So look, there's still some benefit in there for those high income earners, there's no doubt about that. It's just not as much. And there's a little bit that's being thrown in the mix in the lower bracket. So as they've been spruiking, everyone gets a tax cut. Obviously, when we're talking politics and promises, they're going to cop some flack. There's no doubt that that the Liberal Party, the opposition in particular, are going to try and get some political mileage out of the broken promise. But, by the same token, there's going to be a lot of other people out there who are arguing that times have changed significantly since those stage 3 cuts were legislated. We're talking pre-pandemic, pre our inflationary woes, the whole works. And so, arguably there is some merit to that line of reasoning, but really I'll probably stand back and let the politicians argue amongst themselves. Now, of course, the government have acted fairly quickly on this. They've introduced these tax changes into Parliament in the form of Treasury Laws Amendment Cost of Living Tax Cuts Bill 2024. They tabled it in the House of Reps on the 6th of Feb. And as at the time of recording this on the afternoon of 9 February, it's still in the House of Reps. The government control the House of Reps, so we expect it to go through without too much fuss. But it's got to go to the Senate, and that's going to be a bit of a different story. And so it's really crucial to remember that these changes are not law yet. We better not get too carried away, and we just need to wait and see what happens, because the government does need to get it through both houses of Parliament. That's anything but a certainty. And even if they do get it through, there might be some amendments that get made along the way. That's not uncommon. They might be wanting to appease the Greens or some of the other political influences there. So look, we will keep people posted of the progress of this bill as it goes through the parliamentary process. Our usual way of doing that's through our regular blog posts. If you're not currently a subscriber, I'd encourage you to head on over to our website and sign up so that you get some regular updates and know what's going on. In the meantime, if you've got questions about what these changes are, how they're going to affect you, whether you should be doing anything, get in touch. Thank you for tuning into the Sky Accountants podcast. I'm Ashley Carmichael. Until next time.